We are now approaching the middle of 2021 and we are still anticipating more Final Fantasy XVI news. If you watched my last video, I talked about the potential of Final Fantasy XVI being showcased there, due to the recent announcement that Square Enix is confirmed to present at this year's Game Expo. But without concrete information, we can only speculate. But here's to hoping that we do see it at this year's E3 with an array of new information on the pending installment. Will Final Fantasy XVI have party members? Given the footage that we've seen, it appears we're only playing as our protagonist Clyde and just maybe others. It is safe to assume that Final Fantasy XVI could follow previous FF installments and could have its own party system, but sometimes information can be key. According to previous reports and rumors from last year, supposedly for Business Development 3, The Witcher was part of the inspiration in conceptualizing Final Fantasy XVI. But I would take that information with a grain of salt because there were no concrete evidence of that being true. However, Yoshi-P, who is the producer of this installment, has expressed before on the importance in research and understanding current gaming trends. Which is why once he took over Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn became such a huge success after FF14's underwhelming launch in 2010. That is why research is necessary, and it is why so many are putting their faith in Yoshi-P and why there is so much hype surrounding Final Fantasy XVI. Because Yoshi-P has proven to understand Final Fantasy and help elevate it to where it needs to be alongside his team. With the current AAA RPG market, what does this say about Final Fantasy XVI potentially having party members? The answer is, many games in the current RPG market doesn't have a party system. Most of the AAA RPG titles released don't utilize a party system at all, which raises more speculation on Final Fantasy XVI and whether or not the plan is to follow that trend. It is safe to say that yes, Final Fantasy is quintessentially a JRPG, but in recent years after Final Fantasy XIII, it has become clear that Square Enix's focus is on the global market and not just in Japan. Despite that there are very popular AAA RPG titles that have disregarded a party system, there are still some major RPG titles that are still faithful in implementing one. Final Fantasy XVI could toss a coin at this point and go in any direction, but it ultimately comes down to the team behind the game and what direction they want to go in. Because even though the current RPG market in the AAA arena for the most part doesn't utilize a party system, Final Fantasy XVI does not need to conform to that specific trend. If anything, I believe Final Fantasy can still continue to have party members without being a solo character experience. But when looking at how Final Fantasy is continuously evolving as this globalized AAA series, and the fact that the battle system in the series is also becoming more action-oriented, this direction for a solo character experience can be very likely. And with Ryota Suzuki on board as battle director for Final Fantasy XVI, it raises the question on whether or not FF16 will have party members even further. Ryota Suzuki is known for other solo character action-based games such as Devil May Cry and Dragon's Dogma. That is interesting he is the battle director for FF16. In an interview with DualShockers last year in June 2020, when asked what it's like to work with Yoshida and Business Development 3 on a pending title which is now revealed as Final Fantasy XVI, he had this to say about the rising trends in action RPG. I may be exaggerating, but nowadays many believe that Command RPG itself is old-fashioned. These games are called JRPGs outside Japan, and older players will play them, but the younger generation, raised playing GT and FPS games, aren't used to command-based battle systems. They feel weird seeing a system where the enemies and allies will simply stand as they wait for commands. Square Enix still deem RPG as important though. We plan to make games for those who enjoy our work until now, and for the younger players who are more used to action games. If this is any indication, Final Fantasy XVI will still adhere to the series' RPG roots, but that doesn't necessarily mean a party system could be a part of that. If Final Fantasy XVI is to be a solo character RPG experience, then I believe we will have prominent characters in the game that can be recognized as quote party members, but will only aid Clyde during certain segments of the story. Perhaps closer towards the end of the game, we will see these characters come together to aid Clyde for the game's climax. Another thing to point out is the narrative of the story. With the information that we have so far, Final Fantasy XVI is essentially a revenge story with, of course, other major political influences in the world of Valisthea. Going off that information alone, it makes even more sense for Final Fantasy XVI to be a solo character experience if this is truly just a revenge story, because it wouldn't make sense to have a party join Clyde on his quest unless his revenge story ties into other issues happening in the world. And the trailer clearly shows that yes, this revenge story could be tied to other influences in this world, which could make having a party member system that much more possible as well. At this point, based on what we know, Final Fantasy XVI could truly go either way. It could very well be a solo character experience or even implement a party system. With E3 around the corner, hopefully we do get information on whether or not Final Fantasy XVI will have party members or not. In my personal experience, just purely based on speculation, I think Final Fantasy XVI will have a solo character experience with the addition of very prominent characters joining Clyde during certain segments of the story. Despite that speculation that I have, personally I would prefer a party system and party members joining Clyde on his story. With how RPG games are evolving and how Final Fantasy is evolving too, a party system in FF16 could be unlikely, but hopefully my speculation is wrong and that Square Enix does not follow this trend. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to stay up to date with more Final Fantasy XVI content from me. Comment below and let me know what you think. Do you think Final Fantasy XVI will have a traditional party system, or do you think it will go solo with Clyde? Thanks for watching, and see you all next time.